All right, so now we're gonna work on some watercolor practice to get ready for our watercolor painting. So the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna come up to the table and you're gonna grab a piece, a small piece of watercolor paper, and just ask me for it. I'll show you where it is, okay? And what we need to do is we need to practice a couple of techniques. So the first thing you're gonna do, I want you to draw a rectangle along the top of your paper like this, okay? And this one is just going to be a value scale, okay? And we're going to do 2 of them. Okay, so then what you're going to do is grab, we're just going to use the tray watercolor. Grab yourself a couple of paintbrushes. I like to have one that I keep wet with paint, and then I like to have one that I keep dry, okay? Paper towel and some water. Okay, so the first thing for I want you to do just a regular value scale. Those of you that have had drawing, you kind of know what I'm talking about, where we're going to go from the darkest dark to the lightest light, okay? Now, here's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to use black just because it's easiest to see on here. Now with watercolor, once you have a dark wash of paint on there, you can't ever lift it up. Like, that's what it is. You can't paint over it with white. It's just not the way it works, okay? So that's why we're practicing. So I'm going to decide here on the left is my dark. And I want to slowly, see how I added some water? I didn't add any more paint, just added water. I want to slowly go from a dark to a very light. All I'm doing is adding water and pushing the paint down the rectangle. Okay? So that is one way to create a value scale. And notice that for the most part, it's a pretty smooth transition of value. It's not choppy. Okay, we're going to practice that a little bit more later, but that's the first step. Okay, now this one right here, this one's going to be a little bit different. This one I'm actually going to, I'm going to take a color. I'm going to take purple. And I'm going to paint the solid color right here in the middle. And this value scale, I'm going to do similar to what we practiced with the acrylic. So right here I have straight up purple in the middle. Now what I'm going to do, without adding any more paint, I'm going to create lighter value going to my right. I'm doing it more like a box situation this time. I'm not adding any more paint. Don't worry about staying in the lines. Okay. Now this one, you can mix watercolor. I think a lot of times people forget that you don't have to use them straight out of the tray. Like, that's, the colors are just there for you. It's just a way that they present the colors, but you can still mix the colors. Okay, so I'm going to try to gradually increase our darker value. So what I did here, I think you saw me, I mixed a little purple here on my tray, and I put a teeny bit of black. Now I'm going to paint black. So a hair darker value. I'm going to add a little bit more black. It looks like I think I need a little bit more purple. You don't have to use this tray too. You can use a regular mixing tray. You don't have to just use because some of these watercolor trays are pretty dirty. So feel free to grab one of the regular mixing trays that you use for acrylics. So I'm just gradually. The other reason I wanted you to practice adding black to a color to increase the value, the darkness of value, is because notice it also changes the tone of the value a little bit. And we talked about this when we used the other black paint with the acrylics. The black paint has either a warm or a cool tone to it, okay? And again, this one has a little bit more of a warm tone. So you can see when I started adding it to the purple, it neutralized the purple a little bit. The purple lost some of its brightness, okay? All right, so practice those two. And then the next thing you're going to do is a 2-color gradient. So I'm going to draw another rectangle. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to practice using two colors and having them blend into each other. So what I'm going to do first for this is I'm actually going to wet my space right here first. And I'm going to blend red into green. So I'm going to start right here with red, a nice deep red. Okay, and I'm going to rinse and wipe. And I'm going to go in with some green. Okay, a little bit more. All right, now I'm going to rinse my brush. I don't have any paint on it now. And I'm going to pull that green over. I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm going to pull that red over. Now remember when I said I usually have a dry brush with me too? That's so I can do this. So I'm seeing what happens when I push and pull. And I know it's a little tricky to see on my camera. My camera doesn't do that great a job. But I want you to try to like merge two colors, okay? All right, and then the last thing on this paper is I want you to try practicing a sphere. So draw a circle. Don't worry if it's not the world's best circles. This isn't architecture and engineering class. This is art class. So now we want this circle to look like a sphere. This is something we worked on in intro, something if you took drawing with me, we work on all the time, really trying to create that transition of value, but also creating a form and making it look realistic in 3D. So I'm gonna work with purple. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here where my dark value is. Right, I'm gonna pretend there's a shadow right there. So I lay in kind of dark. Now, I gotta build up, okay? I don't want the whole sphere to be dark. So then what I did is I just rinsed my brush off of paint and I loaded it up with water. And now I'm just pushing some of that purple color using solely water across my sphere. And notice I'm painting with the contour lines. I am painting with the cross contours. I'm not going straight across. I'm not going straight up and down. I'm going because I still want to enhance that shape of the form here. Okay, I'm going to let that dry a sec. While I let that dry, I'm just going to come on in and I'm going to put a shadow. I'm going to be really careful because right now it's wet, and if I touch the purple with my black paint, I'm going to get a big, it's going to smear. So coming in with the shadow a little bit. Okay. All right. Now, yours is going to look better than mine because I'm working fast. But in reality, you would want this sphere to dry a little bit more. I don't have that kind of time. So now I loaded up my paintbrush with a little bit more purple paint. Okay. And now I'm going to add another layer of, because I want to push that darker value again. So I'm coming in here. I'm loading up another layer of darker value. It's subtle. It takes a while with watercolor, okay? You got to just be patient. I'm going to rinse it off again. Rinse it off. And with watercolor, you don't necessarily have to be quite as tight as you were with the acrylic paint. With watercolor, it lends itself to be a little bit more expressive, a little bit looser, and that's totally fine. And that's a reason a lot of artists choose watercolor, because they like that that looser, more just gestural type of painting instead of, I mean, you can do that kind of painting with acrylic and oils. But watercolor just automatically lends itself to that. Okay. All right. So this is what you're doing on the first page. 3 rectangles, practicing creating value, a sphere. Then you're going to take a picture of this and you're going to upload it into Classroom in the watercolor painting assignment. Perfect.